Welcome back to I Need a Coach, where we interview top coaches, consultants, experts, authors, and speakers. Hear their stories of success, who they help, how they help them, what makes them different, and how do they stand out in a busy world of coaching. My name's Adam Packard. I'm the host of I Need a Coach. And for the last 7 years, we've helped over 500 coaches help them with their business building, lead generation strategies to fill their calendar. Today, I'm joined by George Randle, who is a former Army officer turned executive recruiter. And he's going to share some ideas on why it's important to have some assessments in your back pocket to use when you're in your coaching business, more specifically the Hogan Assessment, and why he thinks performance improvement plans are a joke. So you'll enjoy this one. Welcome back. Welcome back to I Need a Coach. I'm your host, Adam Packard, and with me today is George Randle. George, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I talked a few weeks ago and had a great conversation, and would love to have you share with the audience a little bit more about your background, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I have to do that with most of my clients pretty quick when you do an intro. Kid of limited means, so I enlisted in the Army. Got the leadership bug, did about 9 years as an officer around the world with combat tour. And I got out and somehow fell backwards into HR and recruiting. And I did 25 years in the talent space and, rose to the top where I was VP of talent acquisition for several large companies. My teams have hired about 85,000 across the globe. But I found I was teaching executives how to interview on both sides of the equation, inside the company, outside the company. And somewhere along the line, I got into assessments, figuring out talent. So I'm now an advanced Hogan certified leadership assessment coach. And so I now do two things. I'm a managing partner of an executive search firm. And then I have my LLC on the side that came from a book that I wrote called The Talent War: How Special Operations and Great Organizations Win on Talent. And a lot of my coaching clients are on that side of the business, and my search firm allows me to continue with those clients. So I have about 15, 20 clients that I coach, and I do executive search at the same time. So they complement one another pretty well.
So walk us back to the transition from being in the Army to falling into the HR recruiting space. So how did that come about, and what was it about that I guess got your attention?
Well, there was one stop we won't mention, but it was a big box retailer because I went through one of those veteran firms and they wanted leadership. They placed me there. What I figured out is they wanted managers. I did really, really well, but I jumped out of there as soon as I could to KPMG Consulting, and I was a manager, an engagement manager consulting in the defense space. Not for very long, though, because I had a family emergency that required me to get out of the Virginia area and get back to Texas. And so they said, well, can you do recruiting? Can you do HR? It's like shrugged my shoulders and said, how hard could it be? But what was really interesting about it is that I'd come from the business side. And so it became very, very easy to learn it. The next thing you know, they were like, oh, you have some leadership experience from the Army. So they gave me 3 or 4 more people. I don't know, within about 7 or 8 months, I had a team of 15 and I was handling, business unit of about 9,000 people. From there, jumped over to Booz Allen Hamilton, then jumped into HP, where I was, just skyrocketed from Booz and HP up the talent chain. And so it was part accidental, but really purposeful. I made the choice. And what I found is that building high performing teams, that's what I really enjoyed in the Army. So the light bulb really went off once I got into the HR function.
Interesting. So the building the high performing teams is what the Talent War kind of goes into?
It does. What we did with the book, The Talent War, is we took, MARSOC, Marine Raiders, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Army Pararescue, then paired it up with good companies. And what we were trying to figure out is, there's this expression that says experience tells you where you've been, character tells you where you're going. So what we were trying to do is, how do those organizations define talent? And that's really what we were writing about. And then we took it into, what companies could do better, because there's this deep belief and it falls right into coaching, which is the only competitive advantage you can hope to achieve and maintain are your people, is your talent. And so, the book really spawned that. So I do some speeches from it, but then people are like, you really should be coaching a lot of people. And so I said, well, that sounds great. Let's go do it.
And so the coaching that you do is outside of the recruiting firm. It's your own kind of.
It is. It is. However, what's become interesting is most of our searches are now using assessments. And so now I'm doing coaching and assessments on that side as well. Got
it. So the coaching that you're doing outside from the recruiting. So who's your ideal client that you work with there? Is it all over the board? Is it recruiting firms? Is it large companies and CEOs?
No, it's been a mix of companies. I mean, I have a law firm. I have a $6 billion agribusiness, chief technology or chief transformation officer there, CEO of a $600 million personal injury firm, CEO of a marine charter company, which has got about 75, 80 boats. And then another, couple CFOs and COOs in there that are from power generation. So it has not been industry specific.
Interesting. So it's more, and how did you find those? Are they all referrals?
A lot of them were referrals. A lot of them were, they had seen me give a speech on the book and talk about talent. And heavy in those speeches is that, we had to button up the book and, trying to keep it brief. You can't hire or fire your way to success. You have to coach, mentor, teach, and develop. And so when they heard that, a lot of people started coming straight towards me to say, well, do you coach leadership? Do you coach leaders on how to communicate better and how to lead given your background? And I said, absolutely. And so it's just kind of taken off.
So let's go back to, how you built teams when you were in the Army and then transitioned to some of the companies that you worked with. What are some, I guess, key principles or things that you do to build those solid teams?
Well, one of the critical things that I explain to clients is there's a big difference. Is number one, in the Army, which is what I was a part of, you get the hand you're dealt, and you have to coach, mentor, train, and develop what you have to be the best possible team. So you learn to get really good, and you know how to distinguish between coaching and mentoring. But some of the things about high-performing teams is it really does start with leadership. If you don't have great leaders, if you don't have leaders that are trying to get better, trying to improve, and there's a phrase that I use with a lot of my clients called, or the way I say it is, the better you get, the better you better get. And so I'm always talking to them about how to get better and accomplish their goals through improving their communication, looking at their blind spots, thinking more strategically, far less emotional thinking and decision making. So it really runs the gamut. But I'm taking, I was fortunate to be in the world's greatest leadership incubator in the military, both on the enlisted and officer side. So much of that carries through, and then combined with the time, sitting in C-suite meetings, suffering death by PowerPoint numerous times, I actually, am able to convey in business terms the leadership that I learned in the Army and have carried through and continue to practice.
So when you go into a company that, say, brings you in, what are the first things that you look for? Like, where do you start the process? Are you starting at the top and then kind of working your way down? Are you trying to identify what their current style is, or what's the process?
Well, it depends. Well, I'll get to the process, but I want to digress a little bit. It depends what they bring me in for. Some people have brought me in because they want a personal coach. They're expanding their business. They know they have blind spots. They want to get better. Sometimes a company will bring me in because they have a person that they hired, they've invested a lot in, they're not performing. So it's to really ramp this person up. Another case would be a successor. How do I fill in the blanks for this person to be a successor for the next role? And then lastly, there's the reclamation project, which is we're going to invest 90 days in this person. And, if it doesn't work out through coaching. So, that's usually how I get in. But, the first thing that I'll do is just a basic interview to see if I want to work with them and to see if they want to work with me too. Yeah, that's really important. People kind of overlook that step. Is I don't want to work with anybody who's not committed to improving and not committed to being authentic and honest and maintaining confidentiality and giving it their all to get better.
I can kind of see you as just a no BS kind of guy, just like, say it how it is. Am I right? you
I
don't
give you an example. I don't know if you can swear on a podcast, but
shit, yeah, you can.
All right. Well, one of the CEOs I met, he's like, man, I want to hire you. You're going to coach a lot of my people. And I said, well, let's talk a little bit more. And he says, what's there to talk about? He goes, I got money coming out my ears. I'll pay you whatever you want. And I told him, he said, well, what would hold you up? And I said, well, if you're an asshole, I'm not working with you. He goes, I want to work with you even more now. I said, we're still going to keep going until we figure out whether this is going to work.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be banging my head on the table week after week talking to you.
Right. That's
but the other part of the process is once I get somebody, I usually administer a Hogan. I will certainly do the introductory meeting, find out what they're hoping to achieve. If they've hired me, from their own money so they could get better, or the company's hired me and there's specific goals that we get those really crystal clear. But then I'm going to go do a Hogan so I can see the DNA of the person. Because anybody can talk a good game. Well, not anybody, but a fair amount of people can talk a good game. But I want to see what's behind the curtain or under the hood, as they say.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about this Hogan assessment. It's something I've heard of. I've not gone through one. So what is it? How does it work? And how does it help you?
So there's a lot of assessments out there. Most people have heard of Myers-Briggs, success factors, any number of those things out there. The Hogan started with the OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA, and at some point they commercialized it. And really what it was is it evaluates a person in three specific areas. One, what are your values and motivators? Number two, what is your personality? How do you show up day to day? And third, what counterproductive or destructive behaviors come out when you're under stress? So I get to see three different things, and I'll understand what's driving the person, how they're acting those values out in the workplace. And then I'll also be able from the personality to see what their stress tolerance is. And then on the derailer side is what is called the Hogan is, okay, what are the areas if this person gets under stress, behind a deadline, isn't making their numbers, what's going to show out? Are they aware of it? And so if it's a reclamation project or a successor in any one of the categories, it's really a great place to start to say, hey, what do you think your areas are for improvement?
Yeah.
And they should line up with the Hogan. And if they don't, then we start right there.
So do you ever have it where someone fills this out and you're like, oh crap, I can't work with this person? Or has everybody got areas that you can help them with?
Well, if they commit to getting better,
yeah,
then absolutely whatever comes up on the Hogan, we're going to deal with.
So one thing you mentioned is you don't believe in performance improvement plans. So tell me a little bit about that, because yeah, so because I was a part of a company and they did all these 360s, and there was a couple people that were on performance improvement plans. So why do you not like them? And what do you what do you do instead of doing that for someone?
Well, this will probably irritate a lot of general counsels and legal departments in big companies, but lawyers, when they're in a company, they're there to minimize risk or to take care of challenges that the companies face. So they're always risk averse. So between them and HR acting like a compliance or policing function, they're more feared of getting sued than anything else. So that's where all of this stuff comes from. And then they used to take those performance improvement plans and say, well, this is a form of coaching, how we get somebody better. And my belief was always, if you're a good leader and you're communicating frequently to your people what the standards are, when they're meeting them, when they're falling short, helping them, investing in them to get better, why would I need to put them on a plan? Because that's what I'm doing already. Yeah, you want me to document some stuff so that way you don't get your ass suit off? Oh, okay, fine. Well, we'll knock one out. But I may have done a few, but only because I was forced to. And people thought I was nuts. But I'm like, look, I communicate with all of my leaders 2 downs. And sometimes when the organization's really, really big, I'll go 3 down when I can to communicate, less frequently. But everybody always knows where they stand with me as a leader. And if something goes wrong, it's not personal. Hey, how do we make this better? How do we get the desired result that we had planned on getting? What could I have done better to support you? What could you have done better? We're always talking about those things. So if somebody is not meeting expectations on a continuous basis, they don't need a pip to remind them of that. They're hearing it firsthand from the horse's mouth. So I think they're kind of worthless. I think they're a cover your ass kind of piece of paper, and they make absolutely no sense in at-will states to begin with. So why are you doing them?
Yeah. So let's talk about leadership a little bit. So you learned obviously a ton when you were in the Army and leading a team there. Did you continue to study leadership? Did you study from someone? Did you, find a coach yourself, or was it just stuff that you learned from the Army?
Well, it's kind of all of the above. I think, as you go through the military, you're learning leadership from both good leaders and bad leaders and mediocre leaders. You're just soaking up everything. Well, I would do it that way, or I like this, I didn't like this, I like the way this person communicates, I like the way they plan, I like the way they think, I like the way they motivate, whatever it is they do. And you just carry that into corporate America. Now, it took me a little bit to get used to, well, let's put it this way. Most of the senior executives in a company think they're leaders, but you can't call yourself a leader. That's a title that's given to you. Leadership is a verb. Leader is a noun. You can't self-describe yourself as a leader. So as much as I was learning leadership, I used those same principles to kind of be a sponge with the executives that I worked with, and what worked, what didn't work, how did they do things, how did they communicate, how did they plan, how did they think, what risks were they willing to take, how did they manage those risks, mitigate those risks. And so if you're somebody that loves leadership and likes being a leader, you really are just kind of driven to keep getting better and better and better. So that's really what it was.
Yeah. So you've got your book. What book are you reading right now?
What book am I reading?
Or what's one that you've read recently that, yeah.
Well, there's 2 of them. There was one, Code of Trust, and then the other one is Sizing People Up. And they come from former FBI agents and designed to, study human behavior and what that behavior shows you in the way of personality. And so I'm just always fascinated by the human condition. So even with the Hogan and diagnosing them, when I'm talking to somebody, now I'm watching that body language. What does that tell me? When their eyes go, or when their hands go down to their, thighs and they start rubbing them, what little tells am I seeing that I can dig into and say, hey, wait a minute, what you're expressing and what you're saying is not what you're feeling. Let's go back to that.
Yeah. I can imagine you're probably a good poker player then.
Well,
you should be able to read people pretty well.
I do, but I hate losing. I'm extremely competitive. I don't like losing. I'm a competitive soccer player, but I don't gamble because I hate losing.
Yeah. What's the plan for 2024? What's going to change in terms of are you bringing on more clients? Are things just kind of chugging along and working well, or do you have any marketing or ideas that you can share with us?
Well, it's really chugging along. The thing that I found, I got very, very lucky, and I don't know whether I can name the group, and I won't just because they haven't given me permission. But I became an executive coach for this women's executive group, a mastermind group. And so as much as I would like to go out there and market, I have to watch that fine line because my primary business and my primary focus to my bosses needs to be the executive search. But the coaching is kind of self-generating. The better of a coach, the more you help, the more that word gets around. It's kind of like speaking. The better speaker you are, those audiences get spread all over. And so I'll get calls, all the time. there's a limit to what I can take. And so I'll probably have about 3 or 4 new clients before the end of the year. But, I really, really enjoy it. It's I don't know, it's satisfying as long as the person's improving.
Yeah. And obviously you and I both know how many coaches are out there. For those that are so I think I heard a stat the other day. There was 2 million coaches before COVID, 6 million after COVID. So obviously in a super competitive space. So if you were just doing coaching, didn't have the executive search for them, and we're starting from ground zero, what would you do to kind of get it off the ground? Obviously you have to be good at what you do and deliver results, but what advice would you give to anybody kind of breaking into the coaching space?
Well, number one, what is it that you're really, really great at that you can bring to the table to give to others? Because essentially coaching is giving to others the benefit of your experience. And also, I wanted to make the point that coaching and mentorship are, both intertwined when you're working with clients. Sometimes you're sharing your own experiences as mentorship, and coaching is a process of asking them and working through things. But I would share with people, make sure you know why you're getting into it. Remember that you have to deliver results, and you have to be good with people, and you have to be able to meet them where they are. I would get yourself, a decent website, but more than anything else is I would, make sure you're certified in several different assessments. I wish I had done a long time ago. There's like the International Coaching Federation. There's some certifications in there that you can get. They don't count my past hours. So now that I've coached thousands upon thousands of hours, I don't go back since they won't take them. But I would get a certification if you can, and then really drive your network as best you can on LinkedIn.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, this has been great. So tell us, this is your chance to kind of share with the audience how they can find you, where they can learn more about your work, and whatever you'd like to promote. So floor is yours.
Yeah. www.georgerandle.com. So I have a website, so it's speeches, and people could reach me that way. They could reach me at George@6 advisory.com. or George at Randle Partners. Because a lot of people one of the great things about the search is just simply that a lot of people, I'm helping companies learn to assess before you go to search. Is this person salvageable? Because you're going to spend a lot of money in search. So, but probably best way to reach me is George at m6advisory.com.
Awesome. George, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Thanks for coming on the show, and look forward to another conversation.
Hey, thanks so much. It was good to see you. Good to meet you.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you for joining us on this episode of I Need a Coach. If you've made it this far, I genuinely appreciate your dedication. Putting this podcast together takes a lot of time and energy. In return, we only ask one thing, which is if you could please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps our show get in front of more people so we can help more people. This is Adam Packard signing off. Keep coaching, keep thriving, and see you in the next episode.